In this podcast, I had the privilege of interviewing Danny. Danny is a cop down in Southern Florida. He came highly regarded from my good friend Heather Gloglich, who was on a show with him. And Danny didn't disappoint. We had a podcast probably for 2 hours. We had some technical difficulties in the middle, and I could have probably interviewed him for another fucking 2 hours or more. Very, very similar mindsets when it comes to law enforcement. And we just have a great conversation. We sit there and talk. I didn't know a lot about him. So, it's a very organic conversation and kind of just went wherever it went. I think what is unique about Danny is his parents were Cuban Americans, came over to this country, worked really hard to set up Danny and his siblings to, have a better life. And what I find very interesting is Danny wrote a children's book on how to be safe during an active shooter. A sad topic, but if you could get kids to buy into that at a young age and understand what they should do during these situations, I think that it's eventually going to save a lot of lives. But hopefully you enjoy this podcast as much as I do, and just let me know what you think.
So you got to ask yourself, why do you want to do this? What keeps you motivated to stay proactive and get bad guys off the street?
The facts is a big cannon against a little tiny gun of opinions, because we've all heard people give us their opinions.
Let's talk about how easy it is to get narcotics in this country.
Once they're in this country, anywhere within 2 days, the drugs will be in our cities.
Because we know knowledge is power.
All right, today on Beyond the Barrel, I have Danny. Danny was highly regarded from Heather. I asked Heather, based on the Jubilee show that you guys were on, who she would suggest, and she suggested you with high regard. So honored to have you on the podcast, man. Danny's a 15-year law enforcement officer from South Florida, and prior to that, he was a teacher. But that's pretty much all I really know about him. So it's a pleasure to have you, man.
Thank you, brother. Pleasure to be here. I appreciate Heather for getting me on.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, Heather's good people. I've known her for a long time, and there's not many better than her. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Before we get into who you are and what took you down this avenue of being a cop, you wrote a children's book, right?
I did, yes. So I wrote a children's book on school safety called Officer Daniel Always Keeps Us Safe. And basically what it was is given my experiences as a teacher, a police officer, but also a parent, I saw a need kind of to help kids navigate this very difficult topic for them in an age appropriate, kind of like non-anxiety, causing kind of way. So I created an acronym called SAFE that's in the story. And basically, if the kids can remember the acronym SAFE, it gives them a way of remembering how to stay safe. Unfortunately, given the times that we live in, school lockdowns and emergencies are just part of their childhood. I don't think we're too far off in age, but it wasn't part of our childhood. I remember, Columbine was the first big one for like our generation. I was a junior in high school at the time.
Yeah, I was like maybe 8th grade, 9th grade year, somewhere around there.
Yeah. And then but in this day and age, it just is. I mean, how many do we get every year, right? So just a way of me trying to help kids navigate the hard topic, and parents and teachers, give them a way to kind of approach a topic, because one thing I continuously see is teachers now are being tasked with teaching these subject matters that they're not, experts on, and they're being asked to teach lockdown drills when they're not police officers, they're not first responders. I have a lot of empathy for teachers. I used to do the job. I know how hard it is, but also that the job has changed a lot in the last, 15, 20 years or so. So just trying to help best way I can.
What led you down that road? Like what started, and is it the first book you wrote? And when you're looking at it and there's nothing there, are you just like kind of overwhelmed? Because for me, I would be like, man, like where do I even begin?
So honestly, again, the reason behind it was just as I got to teaching more, because in my agency, I also teach a little bit, and in teaching staff of other schools, and just recognizing that they don't have the experience to navigate this hard topic. So I even have like an old group text chat with former colleagues from my teaching days. They all treat me amazing. I was very young when I taught, so they always treated me like some like their son, some like their their little brother. And as I was going to these schools teaching teachers on school lockdowns, stop the bleed, things like that, I I just saw, how much they didn't know. Again, they're not trained for this. And I remember asking that group chat, like, hey, do you all have something that you use to help you teach, lockdown drills, like a children's book or something? And all of them said, no, do you have something? And I was like, damn, like maybe I will. And the first step that I did, which I thought was very important, is read a few children's books. I have been so far removed from that, age group because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a school resource officer, but I'm at an alternative high school, so I don't deal with little ones. And my wife and I have 3 kids, but our youngest turns 18 in a
Oh,
couple
wow.
weeks, so we're far removed from little ones. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So I hadn't seen a children's book in a while. And so I got a couple, start reminding myself of how the structure of a children's book is, simple sentences and whatnot, which again was, I thought was a good thing for me to do, because if not, I would have written it as an adult to adults, but for kids, and it would have not worked. So I don't have a lick of business in me background, so but I do know that if you're gonna have something, you need to like what's the need for whatever you're offering, right?
Yep.
Your podcast, it's filling a need that isn't out there, right? Because if you have, 100,000 cops with podcasts, like what are you bringing to the table that's different, right? So I looked at how many children's books on school lockdowns are there, and there's not many. And then I said, okay, well, from that group, how many are by police officers? And there was like 2, but they were like retired police officers. No disrespect, to any of them.
Yeah.
But then I said, okay, well, how many are from police officers that used to be teachers? And there was 0. So I said, maybe I can bring a different perspective. And I got with a self-publishing company that I was a bit of a pain in the ass with them to make sure it was right, especially the illustrations. I was very picky about what I wanted to show. Um, but it was a. I don't want to pretend like I wrote a 500 page book on biophysics, but it was a little bit more stressful than I thought.
Yeah. And I
So
think you talk about being picky. I think you have to be picky. You're putting your name on it, right? So if you don't,
yes,
if they're not going to, agree or understand what you're trying to get across, I think that you have all the rights to be like, no, this is what I want, even
and
if
you
they
have to
don't
be
agree.
sensitive to kids
Yeah.
in this day and age. You know what I'm saying? Because again, like even still, if I'm being honest, I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of school entities and whatnot that won't even give the book a chance because you're dealing with a difficult topic, and they rather avoid it in general than face it head on. And I'm sure we'll get into that in our conversation, but I'm a big believer in you cannot it's like any hardships that we go through, whether at work or otherwise, right? You cannot run from reality. What you can do is do the best you can every single day to be prepared for it, so that when hardship comes, you're ready for it. It's the way my wife and I have raised our kids. Like, can't shelter you from the storm, but when that storm in your life comes, we're gonna teach you how to get through that shit. Can I curse, or is it
Yeah. It's fine.
okay, sorry. 'Cause-
You're good, man. We're all cops. It is what
yeah,
it is. That's scary though. Like if I guess principals or superintendents of schools don't want to have your book because it's a tough topic, like that terrifies me in the grand scheme of things. Like you can't have this conversation with I mean, I'm sure the likelihood of other things happening isn't, but there is still a higher likelihood than there's ever been in this country of this happening. And you're afraid to even have a conversation with the kids about it. That's scary shit, man.
brother, you would be surprised, or maybe not, but
No, I mean, I guess I'm not surprised hearing it. It's just the first time that I have heard it. So it's like, damn, man, that's crazy to think about that. They're going to be like, no, this is a tough topic. So we're not going to prepare you. And if God forbid that was to happen, you'll have no preparation or understanding what to do. That
yeah.
sucks.
And it gets frustrating also because again, God forbid you have, the next one, and then it's, hashtag this, hashtag that, pray for this, pray for that. Let's talk politics and get into laws and whatnot, but let's not do anything to help the
Right.
little ones that need the help now, and one of the other podcasts that I was on, I spoke about that. We're like, we're just focused on the wrong things. How long does it take for laws to get changed, right? Takes a while.
Yep.
But the book has a plan in place that literally, if you read it to the kids in the morning, practice it with them a few times, by the afternoon, if God forbid there was an emergency, that same day they would know what to do. But we don't want to talk about
Amazing.
that. We want to make sure, we don't want, pretend it's going to go away. So a little frustrating, but it's a learning process through it all.
Nah, man, it's commendable. That's a cool thing. You're probably the only person that I've had on that has wrote a children's book. That's for sure.
Well, I'm honored.
All right, man. Well, I want to touch on that. So, but let's go take it all the way back, man. Where are you born and raised?
Born and raised in Hialeah, Florida. All right, the 305. Okay. I know people outside of Florida don't really know what Hialeah is. So we describe Hialeah as a sub-city of Miami. All right. So generally, anytime we're out of like Florida, they say where you're from, we usually say Miami. But I got to give a little, props to. Well, you know what? Actually, Matt Damon and and Ben Affleck just made that movie on Netflix, and it drove me nuts because the whole movie they said Hialeah, and it's Hialeah. We saw the preview and we're like, all right, our city's getting some respect around here. Then I actually saw the movie and I was like, oh God, no, they said it wrong the whole time. But yeah, Hialeah, Florida. Yeah.
I actually had a female cop that's from Hialeah. She's a cop down there. It sounds like a real piece of shit, but I think her name's like Catherine or Cat. I don't know. It was early, but
God bless it, brother. Born and raised, but as soon as I got married, we moved the heck out of there, and I'm in Miramar, Florida right now, or for the last 18 years that I've been married, and it's the most southern city in Broward County. So we border Miami Gardens.
Okay.
So it's really maybe 15 minutes away from where I grew up, but it's like a whole other world because we're in Broward County now. We came up,
Miami Gardens is a rough area, though, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Growing up, what's childhood like? Siblings, parents?
My parents are still together. High school sweethearts.
That's awesome.
Been married a very, very long time, almost 50 years now.
Beautiful.
They are the model of excellence, man. Really are when it comes to relationships and parenting. I always say if I'm half a father, my dad is. I'm doing pretty damn good. Older sister, younger brother. I'm the middle one. So I have all the middle child symptoms stuff. You know what I mean? We're all 5 years apart, and very close knit group growing up. I didn't have a whole lot of extended family. I didn't have. I'm a Cuban American. In our culture, like the abuelita, the grandma's very big. I never had any of that because they passed before I was born. So, I've always we call it the core five, it's the five of us that were in that house. And now it's been so great the last almost 20 years seeing like my sister with her kids and my kids and then them grew up kind of together because we didn't have that growing up. So a very close-knit family.
Any of your siblings in law enforcement, parents in law enforcement?
Nobody in my family at all. I had no idea about being a police officer when I was little at all. I wanted to be a baseball player.
This makes sense.
Yeah. Cuban, right? Of course.
Yeah.
Baseball. Yeah.
Mom and dad, what kind of work did they do?
So mom worked in payroll for many years, and dad was in collecting for like a mortgage company.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you didn't pay your mortgage, he was that guy that would knock on your door and see what's up and whatnot. And so yeah. But for first generation, they both came from Cuba when they were younger. So it's one of the reasons why, the way I grew up, it's a blessing, man, to see how far we've come because growing up, my parents, they didn't do what they loved. They did what they had to do, and they always, told us go to school, get an education, so that you can do something that you love. And here we are, and I love what I'm doing, despite all the challenges that we face that I'm sure that Yeah.
That's awesome. Backing up a little bit.
Yeah.
Were your parents forthcoming about like stories of their travel, stories of Cuba when you were growing up, or?
Very much so. My mom came as she was a lot smaller. And what people don't realize is depending on when you came, everyone thinks that like, the whole Scarface thing, they just come from Cuba and they settle in Miami and that's it. But um, there was a time where you would get to South Florida, but they would ship you out places. The United States would ship you different places. So my mom's family was shipped to holy crap, I'm going back to Detroit, Michigan.
Oh wow.
Yeah, to Detroit, Michigan. Um, and my mom's family had to start from scratch. My dad came later on. He was a little bit older, so they were able to settle in Hialeah and whatnot. But my dad, since he became a little older, he's a lot more stories growing up from him, and he has a phenomenal memory and whatnot. So, yeah,
What
I've never been myself. I don't know if I ever will, but we'll see.
what trials and tribulations did they have? Were they pretty open with you about those?
Oh yeah, I mean things that this country we especially now. I talk a lot with both my parents, but my dad more so about people in this country now where everyone like we're turning over flags and like oh this country's the worst, this country's that, where he's like you this generation doesn't understand what a blessing it is to be here, like the simple things like to go to a supermarket and get all the food that you want. That's unheard of over there, where they would give you kind of portions for the month or whatever it is, and that's what you had. So things like that. And he also came, my dad did, from a rough neighborhood in Cuba. So the trauma and the violence that he saw growing up. I mean, my wife and I were actually talking about the other day, like how my dad is like such a nice, amazing dude, given all that he's gone through. Is just a testament to the mental strength, because it's a lot that he saw.
Yeah, that's crazy, especially at a young age, and been able to, however he navigated that, and it doesn't create demons that are
Yeah,
present, and that's pretty awesome. With the siblings growing up, did you play any sports or anything like that?
baseball my whole life. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you all the way through high school and all that?
All the way to high school, I played. Well, I had you ever heard the expression "a cup of coffee" in like the big leagues or whatever? I
Yeah.
had a cup of coffee in a small college you've never heard of,
Okay.
and and that was the extent of it for me. I was gonna play second base next to A-Rod at shortstop. The problem was I wasn't that damn good. You know.
Right, better than me, so that's all that matters. With growing up with your siblings and being the middle child, uh, the whole dynamic there being picked on by the olders and all that good stuff, or no?
Well, my sister was older. She didn't really.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
she's older. She's older. Um, she didn't really pick on me. I mean, the worst that I have as far as anything like that was when I was, I want to say, in maybe kindergarten or first grade. She was like in fifth or whatever, and she was a patrol, and she would like tell me to get in line in front of everybody, that kind of stuff, and I'd be like, "Yo, relax." But as the older sister, not really at all. Like she always had my back. There was another incident where it wasn't her picking on me; it was her trying to help me. They would make all the kids in Dade County take like an ESOL test, because they assumed English was our second language. And
Oh,
for
I got
me, it
you.
was
Okay.
my first. And I was in kindergarten. And this is a story my mom always shares because it shows how hard headed I am. And they gave me this test, an ESOL test, and I'm in kindergarten, dude. And I'm like, I'm not taking it. Like, I speak English just fine. I'm good. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, you got to take it. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to. And they called my sister from fifth grade and she was like, Danny, you're going to get in trouble when you get home. I'm like, it'll be what it'll be, but I'm not going to take it. And so, no, like I said, we've been always very close. And, but it's just a little story of my hard headedness, which I always say when I was younger, me being hard headed would get me in trouble. But as I became an adult, it's what kind of helped me, get where I'm at, because you can't tell me I'm not going to do something that I want to do. Um, you can't tell me no. You can't tell me to quit. You can't, so it's benefited me more as an adult than it did as a kid, for sure.
Nah, that makes sense. That makes a lot more sense. W- Did you end up going? You had to go to college, right?
Yes. So when the baseball thing didn't work out, I came back home to kind of reassess. I also went through, which I don't know if you want to get into it or whatever, but I went through a very like traumatic thing,
Yeah, let's talk about it.
losing somebody close to me when I was 19. And so, I had to kind of like take my time to mourn that and kind of get over that, and well, not get over it, but kind of move on from it. And
What
didn't know
happened
what
there?
I was
Let's
going
talk
to,
about
I'm
that.
sorry.
Let's talk about that. What happened there?
It was a girl that I had dated, and she passed away in a car accident. And I had never known anybody at the time who had passed away. So let alone, somebody who I was kind of involved with. Um, it's a big, crazy long story. But so my wife and I are middle school sweethearts, but through the years we were kind of on and off. And so at this point in my life, my wife and I were not even really talking. Um, I was dating the other girl, but just kind of it came back to play later on, just how amazing my wife is. The day after, Janice was her name, after she passed away, my wife came to see me, with her mother, my mother-in-law now. I didn't want to see anybody at the time, but just, I always remember that first person to come see me was her, at a time that we were not talking. She had moved on, I had moved on, obviously. So years later when we reconnected, that's always something that's meant a lot to me. But kind of had to like find myself and what is my purpose here and what am I doing, because I went through like odd jobs. And I remember, I started working at a clothing factory in Hialeah, and I'm packing clothes. And to give you an idea about this place, I was the only part of my group that graduated high school.
Wow.
Okay. And then I'll never forget this man who was my manager by the name of, Ken, actually was his name. And he one Friday takes me out to lunch because I was the best clothes packer in the business. And he was trying to do a nice thing, right? But I kind of reflected that night, and I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, congrats, Danny, you're the best packer at like some clothing factory in Hialeah. Like that's what your life's gonna be. And I was like, nah, like F that. I left the job shortly thereafter. I started community college. And I ended up, I went to community college for a few years. Didn't do terrible, but didn't really like, really get serious until I ended up transferring over to, St. Thomas University to Miami. And there I just hit a switch, man. And I ended up going there end of like sophomore year, but I graduated less than 2 years later. I started teaching immediately. I'll never forget my principal at the time, my boss was like, hey, I know you want to get your master's degree. I don't recommend you do that the first year. The first year teaching's a lot. I said, I appreciate your advice. Really, you're trying to look out, God bless you. And, you know, um, 18 months later, I graduated my master's degree,
That's
you
amazing.
know, and then I kept going, and I ended up getting a second master's degree around the time that I made the decision to leave teaching as a whole. The backstory there, the Cliff Notes version of it. I didn't want to teach like forever. I wanted to be an administrator, and so I got a master's degree in educational, administration. I got another one in instructional technology, which just means I'm really dope in PowerPoints. But then I get into this program in Broward County called, LEAD, which is like a big program to get into. You have to pass the program before you can start applying to be like an assistant principal. And almost immediately getting into this program, I just realized that the role of an administrator wasn't what I thought it was. It was a little bit more political than I thought. And like our job, like any job, but like I tell, people who may be interested in law enforcement, you don't know what something's gonna be until you're there,
Right.
and so ultimately I said, okay, I don't want to be an administrator no more. I don't want to stay teaching, um, forever. And around that time, there's a lot of things that happened at one time, but around that time, I was getting to know the officers in Miramar. At that time, I had already lived in Miramar. I was married, and there was like a little bakery in the area, and I always say it's the closest thing to like a Cheers, in South Florida that I've ever seen, because everybody knew each other. Knew each other. We got our realtors from there, local businesses, and just from me getting my little Cuban coffee every morning, I would meet the officers, and in getting to know them, they would start telling me like, "Man, I think you'd be good. Like, why don't you think about a career change?" And at first I was like, "Nah, man, like." And when I realized that administration wasn't for me, I told my wife, like, man, maybe, I always say it went from I should have been a cop to I should be a cop to like I'm gonna be a cop. And I ended up getting hired. I was 29,
Good.
which they called me Papi at the academy because I was one of the older ones. You know what I'm saying? But looking back, I'm like, man, I was super young. You know.
Yeah.
So that was yeah, from that, and there the change was on, man. It was, but so again, I didn't know I was gonna like police work until I got there. You know, so that was a risk to take when you're married with 3 little ones already. You know, a
Yeah.
big switch. That's why now when people complain and they're miserable every day, like I hate, and I get it, we all been there, but like I hate the like, and I'm sorry I go off on tangents, so cut me off whenever.
No,
But
you're good, man.
when people kind of like they feel they make it seem like the week is such a struggle, dude, to get to the weekend. Like, that whole
Yeah,
happy
sure.
happy hump day, man. We're almost there. Like, I'm like, oh my God, bro. Like, if you're so miserable every day, I'm a big believer you should have things every day you look forward to.
Yeah.
Like every day. And I'm so blessed. I have multiple things. Like every morning, my day starts with jujitsu or the gym. That's number one, knocking out positivity.
Yep.
Then I happen to love what I do. Then I have a wife I come home to. Our kids are older. They don't really want to hang out with us. They're doing their own thing. But just simple things, having dinner with my wife, watching TV, whatever it is. But multiple things, like every day is dope for me, man. Like,
Yeah.
but and so when I tell people if you're miserable where you're at, make a change. It's not just me talking smack. I can speak to that. I did it. It wasn't easy. I hate the term like join the force. Like if we just went to some, YMCA type stuff and signed our name on a form and then badge and gun, here you go, like no, there's challenges with that, right?
Yep.
We gotta pass tests. We gotta physically be on point, all these things. We gotta go to academy. So it wasn't easy, but I refused to be miserable every single day of my life. And God, that I'm grateful. 15 years later, I love the job. God forbid there's a day I don't, I am out, bro. Like I'm not gonna. I need to be happy. Going back to my childhood, I didn't see my parents love what they did. They did what they had to do. So I'm not doing that. Not now. Not ever.
What was your aspirations going down the education to become a teacher?
When I was like in college and what made
Yeah.
me want to be a teacher,
Yeah.
honestly, it was something where I started I think it was 19. So like after like I left that warehouse job, I get a job at a school working like aftercare. Okay. So like I worked like from 1:30 to 6, little part-time job while I was going to school. Um
What's
and now
aftercare? I'm sorry.
aftercare is like, like when school's out, but parents can't pick up the
Okay.
kids like at 2 or 3 or whatever, so they kind of stay till 6.
Gotcha.
Um so I would start the shift at 1:30. We'd go over a little meeting or whatever. Then the kids get dismissed at 2, and then you have like your class of kids. And at that time, I'm 19 years old. I mean, I'm a big kid myself, and I'm having fun with the kids. We're playing sports, and I'm like, man, I should be like a PE teacher. This is pretty cool. And again, people told me I was pretty good at it. I remember one thing and then it's crazy because there's former students of mine from that time period that I'm still in contact with, and it's crazy
That's
because
cool.
they're like, some in their 30s now and whatnot. But one little thing that I would do that was a little bit odd that people, but they appreciated was, think about it as a you have kids?
No kids.
No kids. Okay. Well, think about just a parent in general, right? Like when do you think parents get called by anybody from the school? It's when there's bad things, right?
Right. Yep.
So like once a week, I'm like 19, like on Fridays, I'd pick 5, kids that just in aftercare. This wasn't even really real school, but they just, they were helpful. They didn't give me a hard time or whatever. And I'd write a little note to their parents, like, "Hey, Johnny was awesome this week, man. Y'all should be proud." And that little thing was like, these parents would be like, "Who's this guy? Like, who does that?"
Yeah.
But it was a good thing because I'm big on like, as much as you want to talk, nonsense and talk negativity, how about we spread some positivity?
I'm huge on
So
it.
yeah, I was big on that early on. So yeah, so working that job, I was like, maybe I should be a school teacher. I've always been a family guy. I always wanted to be like married. I always wanted to be a father. Um, Summers off seems pretty cool, right?
Right.
And so I was like, oh, I'll be a teacher, and I loved it, man, until I didn't.
So, ironically, I started my college career and I wanted to be a teacher, and then 9/11 happened my freshman year of college, and it changed my perspective. But so I was just curious on what your motivation was, and mine was very similar, just to kind of have like a positive impact on a very impressionable youth. I didn't come
Yeah.
from the greatest childhood, and I was like, man, if they could see that, I came from kind of a shitty childhood on some avenues. I wasn't I wasn't like in a gutter or anything, but it wasn't the greatest. But I can show them like, you don't have to follow that path. There's always a way out of that area. And that was kind of my goal. And then, kind of law enforcement, it's very similar in my mind. I mean, you can still guide people that are kind of on that, like that fork in the road. You can explain like,
Yes.
I kind of was in that same boat, man, and you don't have to go that way. This way, it's going to be a lot better. So, um, kind of came full circle. But yeah, like that. I think you're the first person I talked to that even was going down that education route, and you actually completed it. Where I just dipped my toe in, and I was like, nah, this is not for me.
Yeah, no, but it's funny you said that because that's how I feel even now. So I mentioned before, I'm a school resource officer, but I'm at an alternative high school. They don't like that phrase no more, but it's an alternative high school. It's where you go when you kind of get in trouble elsewhere or got kicked out of your regular school
Yeah,
or whatnot. Not every kid there is a bad kid or anything like that. Sometimes it's just a credit recovery program where they've struggled academically. But to say that I'm the only cop in my agency that loves my school, it's a fact. Like I get asked all the time, like why are you still there, man? You could have gone to other schools by now. I'm like, you kidding me? Like I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Now I came from a background also before I was an SRO. I was a detective in street crimes. So this is my population that I deal with, and to what you were saying, the same thing where like at first, the students didn't really like me just because of the uniform, and I didn't
right.
take it personal. But as they got to know me, and realize that I like the same music they do, like I like tattoos just like them. I'm all like sleeved up and whatever, and you know what I mean. Like, and I grew up from an area not different from theirs because I had the family stability growing up. But like you were saying, like I didn't grow up in like the worst hood in the world and all that stuff, but definitely not a great area, you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah,
so I went through those kind of things where I did have those friends that, went this way and did the gang thing and I had to go this way. And you know what I mean? So to show this next generation of like, not every cop was like this, you know, rich guy that just grew up and, we all came from similar backgrounds and you do have options, in other words.
yeah, for sure. That's cool, man. I love the positivity. There's a lot of negativity, and there's even a lot of negativity within this profession. So, seeing people out there doing positive stuff, it's
Oh yeah.
refreshing to see for sure. When you get into law enforcement, do you have any aspirations, or do you just like, I'm happy being a cop? Like, do you have any specialty?
Immediately, I wanted to get into street crimes.
Okay.
Immediately, yeah, I wanted to get into street crimes. So literally from day one, I mean, when you're on FTO, right, you're gonna do what the field training officer tells you. But I had an interest in street crimes, and so I worked towards that interest. Now I teach, part of what I do. I don't do it every day, not even every week, depending on when they come out of the academy. But I'll teach new hires, and I always throw that in there of like don't wait till there's an opening in the position that you think you want to work towards that position. Work on it from day one, you know. Um, Pay your dues, put your time in. And I always tell the story of like, from day one, I worked towards my goal of being in street crimes. So I still have in the back of my unit, like a photo album that on my own, it's full of gangbangers that when I would go and do like field contacts and all these things, I take a picture of them. I have, their all their information, their date of birth, obviously their address, what gang they're in. I got to know the street, in other words, and I was doing that on my own. Obviously, I would still have to, I still had to handle calls and respond to the calls for service, but I would go out of my way to get to know, especially the gangbangers in the area. And when 2 years later, I did the bare minimum on road patrol, which is 2 years,
Nice.
and I put in for the position, and I'll never forget. I had a captain ask me like, "You're the least experienced to put in for this position. Why should we? Why should you get it?" And I said, "Well, from day one, of me being a cop, I've worked towards this position. I didn't, hear a rumor about, an opening that was coming and then like spike up my numbers. You didn't see any of this nonsense. You saw this with me.
Yep.
And I ended up getting it, and it was amazing. And it was at a time when no one left that position. I did it 4 years, and everything happens for a reason. The only reason why I left was I started to get that dad guilt. I mentioned before, family's always been important. And I always missed, I was tired of missing things with the family. And I decided early on in my career, if I had a choice of being super cop or like super dad and super husband, I'm gonna go super dad and husband. I didn't want to be one of those cops married 3 times and all that mess. So that's what got me into the schools. And I'll tell you, 9 years later that I've been at the schools, I've never regretted a minute of it. Whenever my kids, again, they're older now, but whenever they played sports, I was there sitting, watching with my parents, and things you don't get back as they're now older and kind of living their adult lives. You realize that, right? Like, you can't
Yeah.
go backwards. So I'm glad I made the move when I did.
No, yeah, that's commendable. You can never fault someone for putting their family first. So I mean,
Yeah.
that you gave 6 years to working shift work. I'm assuming
Yeah.
street times is probably more nights and afternoons than day shift. I would assume. So you're missing
Yeah.
out on a lot of birthdays, a lot of special events and things along those lines. There's no doubt about it.
Oh,
When
yeah.
you go to the police academy, were you prepared mentally for what was going to take place? I know that we talked about that you've been working out for 30 plus years, so that aspect I'm sure you probably handled pretty easily.
I think mentally, I felt good, to be honest with you. Um, I had, some life experience. And again, even me being a teacher, even me moving when I got married and moving in the area that I moved, I had made it in my mind in the sense of like not that I was done, but I was somebody who wasn't supposed to, where I grew up, you weren't supposed to be these things. You weren't supposed to, move out of there. Like the idea of like home ownership, the way I grew up was like a white person's dream. You know what I'm saying? Like it
Absolutely.
wasn't something that we did. And so I think mentally at that point I was already married. God bless my wife because I always said, she didn't marry a police officer. She married a school teacher.
Right.
And she was on board and she's never told me not to do anything that I am passionate about. But it would have been really difficult to navigate, going for the career if she was not on board. And so I had her support. My kids were really too small to know what was going on, but mentally I felt fine. Honestly, even the physical thing, I've been in shape as far back as I can remember. More like, like athletic, like again, I played baseball, so I was trained like a baseball player. But it was crazy because even I remember, I don't know how to do things and not be prepared for it, uh, as an adult. So I remember looking over all the books and like obviously like before the like I remember the agility course, the obstacle course. And for some reason, I remember looking at like the pictures of all the stuff in the old course and the one going through the window. And I'm like, I haven't gone through a window since the neighborhood, when I was 10, 11 years old. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
for some reason, I was worried about that. And then like I did it once in a practice and I was like, oh, that was nothing. You know what I'm saying? But no, mentally, I felt fine. And again, I was an educator. I had gone to school a lot of times. Like, again, I was not supposed to. I went from graduating high school in the summer because I was such an idiot and I would just mess up. And I always played. I always not played, but I always my grades were good enough to play baseball. You
That's all
know,
you were focused on.
that's all I cared about. And but I was the one in my family. I was supposed to be the smart one, and go figure. I'm the only one of my siblings. I didn't graduate high school in time, which was really embarrassing. And but the mental fortitude to also like get over the trauma that I went through. I did have some time of kind of figuring it out, but then get my life on track, then go to school, then really push. Again, get the master's degree when my boss told me not to. Wasn't trying to like stop me from reaching my potential, but kind of give me good advice. And just to kind of baby step it and be like, no, no, like so. By the time the police academy comes around, I'm like, this is not going to be a problem.
Yeah, going through the police academy, do you guys go within your agency, or is it like anyone from the state? Can they go to
Yeah.
your
So I
academy?
went to the academy in Broward County.
Okay.
And there, like I had one buddy who was also got hired with Miramar. You have people from the sheriff's office, Coral Springs, Pembroke Pines, like neighboring cities, but anybody from the county can go there. It's not just your agency.
Going through the police academy, is there anything that you struggled with, or is it all pretty solid?
Um,
Have you
man,
ever shot a gun before then?
I'm sorry.
Have you ever shot a gun before then?
I had like Honestly, like maybe twice, because I have I call him my cousin, but he's a childhood friend, and he, a kid from New York, and so he always kind of carried legally. All right, make sure we put that. And and so actually was the first one to introduce me to a gun. So we had gone to the range a few times before, then, and then actually before the academy, because when I get hired, it worked out perfectly because my last day of teaching was whatever. It's always like the middle of June, and I literally like 2 days later, because I got hired June 15th, and I remember the whoever it was that called me and said, until the academy, you can come help out like at the range at one of our stations. You can just help out, but you get paid full pay, full benefits. When can you start? I'm like, tomorrow, like say less. So I was there maybe about 2-3 weeks before the academy started, and I'd clean up the range. When they had driving training, I would just help set up the training and whatnot. But the training sergeant let me shoot a little bit um, before the academy. So I'm gonna go back on what I said. Actually, I struggled a little bit with the shooting. I remember that because I had already by that point got some rounds, downrange with the way my agency wanted me to shoot. So I went to the academy with the way my agency wanted me to shoot, but it wasn't how the academy wanted me to shoot, if that makes sense,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
those
yeah,
that
for
don't,
sure.
So I struggle with that. And it's just again, it's like FTO, right? Like you may have your style of doing something, but while you're in FTO, do what the FTO wants you to do,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So but I remember that. I remember like just the whole I'm a going back to the book, right? I'm big on like repetitive stuff, like the baseball player background. You want to get good at ground balls, you take 1,000 ground balls, right?
Right.
So already learning something, and now my head is like, no, this is the way I shoot because this is the way my agency taught me to shoot. And then I go somewhere else, and you're like, no, that doesn't work. You got to do this, and I'm like, what are you talking about? you
Yeah.
know. So that was a bit of an adjustment.
Yeah, for me, I never like I don't know. I shot a gun, but I never like actually like understood the fundamentals of it. So
Mhm.
when I went in there, like I didn't have any bad habits or different habits that they didn't like. So I was like just green, like I was a blank piece of paper. So when they showed me how to do it the way that they wanted it, I was very capable because I didn't know that
Yeah.
there was another way. So but yeah, that would be the only thing that I at the academy that I was just like, man, I don't know anything about guns, and it was just interesting. But yeah, like the instructors at the academy were always like, yeah, we'd rather you not know how to shoot, or not develop bad habits that we have to break and then get you to shoot the right way or whatever. So it's
I heard that.
interesting.
I heard that when it was too late, but
Yeah,
and it's crazy about the gun thing because kind of off topic, but on topic. Like, I don't know if you're felt this way. I remember going back to like the bakery, right, and meeting the cops. Okay, which kind of led to me obviously becoming one later on. Just the notion of seeing a police and I'm already an adult. I'm teaching, and it's just the notion. I remember looking at the cops and be like, they have a loaded firearm on their hip, and they act like they don't have that there. Like they just like that's just part of. It's like how I think of my belt and my
yeah,
tie because I would go to work, work in a suit and tie, and I'm like they don't even seem to pay attention to the loaded gun. It's just normal to them. Where for me, it's like I'd be freaking out. This thing is loaded because you don't know. You're like
yeah,
you're still believing it can just pop off like whenever and
yeah.
So I remember that was a big thing to like kind of get used to.
When you go into your FTO, any trials or tribulations there?
Thankfully, not. Well, so first phase, I actually just telling this the story the other day. I had a kind of like a buddy I had met through like Facebook back then, because he was another young guy, and I met him kind of like while I was in the academy. And so when I graduate the academy and I get my assignment, my first training officer was a retired homicide detective from NYPD who had come down. This was his his second act as a police officer. And I remember telling that buddy of mine, and he goes, "Oh, you got so and so? Damn, dude." And I'm like, "What do you mean, damn, dude? What's up, bro?" And he's like, "I'll tell you one thing, man. If he likes you, great, dude. But if he doesn't, good luck." And he don't cut. He'll give it to you straight. He's old school New York guy, like. And man, thank God, like first day, we kind of hit it off. We were clear, which I kind of when I teach now the new hires, I tell them that if you're not sure, respectfully ask your FTO, hey, do you want me to like act? Am I just watching at first and observing? What am I? Because you don't want to get, you know, jammed up or any negative feedback for something that you were not clear on. And to that point, my first training officer, you know, immediately let me talk. I didn't have a problem with that, at all, as you can tell now, right? And first day we make an arrest. It happened to be happened to be a teacher. I'll never
Oh
forget that because
wow.
I'm like, here I am, former teacher, and I'm arresting a teacher for like a domestic battery. And we were in between stations at the time because one of the hurricanes knocked out headquarters a few years before. So we were in a smaller building at the time. And we go to the station. It was midnight shift, and it's kind of towards the end of the shift. And I'm in one room finishing up my paperwork. And this guy, my training officer, he's in the captain's office, like 2 doors down. I have incredible hearing. It's weird, but whatever. But I'm hearing him talk to the captain about me in a very positive way. Like this freaking guy, first day, he's talking to everybody. I didn't have to fix anything. His reports are on point, made an arrest, safety's on point, blah, blah. He didn't know that I could hear him, but that gave me a lot of confidence, obviously, and made me
Yeah.
feel great. And we're still in touch. He's retired many years now from the second gig,
Good for him.
and moved. But matter of fact, when he retired, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, we had like a get together, and I had never told him how much I appreciated that, because that gave me, again, going back to, you don't know if you're meant for something until you do it or if you're gonna like it, and especially knowing how strict he was, how upfront he was, him giving me that confidence, because obviously, that first day he didn't know I heard that, but throughout the rest of my time with me, he was very complimentary, just give me positive feedback, and it gave me confidence that, hey, maybe I made the right move with this whole career change.
Do you think coming into that profession at an older age with a life experience helped you out tremendously during that time?
100%.
Yeah, if I got hired when I got hired when I was 25. I got hired when I was. If I would have got hired when I was like 21, I don't know if I would still be a cop, because I mean, and
No.
not like anything malicious. I was just young and dumb, like
Yes.
like make dumb mistakes and whatever. But yeah, like I always feel that when I'm talking to people, if they got hired 25, 27, 29, later in life, and they had some life experience, it seemed to make that whole training process a lot smoother.
Yeah. It's one of the recent new hires that I taught. He's 21, and I teach a section on the school resource officer position, but I always, um, it's like a 2 hour block that I have them with, and I go through the SRO thing, and it's important. Um, but I seem to get to that like in about an hour, and then I always find a way to throw in physical and mental fitness. I always find a way to throw in jujitsu. You know, I'm the worst cop critic you're gonna find, and I can't stand when, like, 5 against 1, you're super tough, but you're really quick to grab all the bat tools, and you don't want to use your hands because you're not trained. And however the conversation with the new hires goes organically, I'll do like a little Q&A, like, and one of the things I always ask is, what are you nervous about? And the 21-year-old said, well, and he looks younger than 21 also, and he said, I'm not a big talker, and he said, I'm worried about, going on calls and like, who's this young guy telling me what to do? And I said, especially on domestic, right? So we played out a scenario where I'm like, I'm not gonna curse as much as I did at the time, but kind of like playing, like where we did like a role
Yeah.
playing. And I was that dude. I'm like, what do you know about you look punk, what do you know about fixing my marriage? We kind of, but I gave him tips on how to kind of navigate that, where he may not have the experience from the parents' perspective or the husband's perspective, but his parents are intact and did go through their challenges. So the perspective of the kid,
Right.
any way you can find connection, right, and whatnot. Um, but super squared away young man. I was nowhere near that squared away at 21. So I'm with you there. For me, it was perfect timing because I had the experience of being a teacher, dealing with kids is hard, but also dealing with administration, parents. You got to be like a chameleon. So
Yep,
I,
yep.
I came into law enforcement as prepared as I could be.
As a cop, you got to be a chameleon too. You got to deal with every
Mhm.
walk of life, millionaires to homeless people living on the corner, and you have to
Yeah.
find a way that you can relate in some way, shape, or fashion. So I guess those professions go hand in hand pretty much. Um, at what point in your career did you start getting into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Like, have you always been such a positive person? I know you said that you've always worked out, but where does the positivity come into play? Where does the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu come into play?
Jiu-Jitsu came into play. I started originally, I was 37, so 7 years ago. 7 months into when I start, and I started because I used to box a little bit. Nothing again, baseball was my thing, but the first physical, contact stuff that I enjoyed was boxing, and I would spar a little bit. I didn't fight like obviously I didn't fight professionally or anything like that. For me, it was more just like about being in good shape and learning how to defend myself and whatnot. And I tore my labrum in '06. I was teaching at the time.
That's your shoulder, right?
My shoulder, yeah. And that recovery was the worst. So that was the end of me sparring. And but I was still, once I was ready to, I was still, even now in my garage, I have a heavy bag. You never want to forget how to, throw a punch and whatnot. But I had an incident when I was in street crimes. It's many years removed, so I think I'm okay to talk about it. I've talked about it a few times. But there was an internal affairs investigation because I broke somebody's ribs, and justified, completely justified. But just being involved in an IA at that time, the first one that I knew of, that I knew of, you know.
I prefer it that way.
Um,
And yeah,
yeah.
I don't wanna know, like, all the complaint if I
Oh,
get
I don't want to know. I
I
don't
don't
want to
wanna I
know.
don't wanna know until it's like, "Oh, yeah, you gotta be called to the carpet." I don't wanna know about all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
stressing me out.
But you know, but going through that, it was an eye opener. I knew from the beginning I didn't do anything wrong. I defended myself, but still, it was like a light went on. I'm like, what is this jujitsu shit that Joe Rogan keeps talking about? And what is this thing about like that I can control people without hitting them, And maybe I should look into that. And so I did. I didn't know at the time, but when I started, it wasn't caused by jujitsu, but jujitsu definitely didn't help. I had herniated disc in my neck.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Yeah. So 7 months into jujitsu, I have spine surgery and I
Jeez.
have an artificial disc on my neck. I thought jujitsu was done.
You keep pointing up
Um,
here. Did they go through the front?
they go to the neck. Yeah. I
Oh
don't
my
know. You can
god.
see a little scar there
Oh,
somewhere.
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Wow, man,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah. So completely artificial disc. Technology is incredible. Um, and I'll tell you, recovery, it was the first time since I was 14 that I didn't work. I was 3 months off the job. I'll tell you a good thing about that was maybe 3 4 days. I tell my wife I miss being a cop, which I thought was a good thing,
Yeah,
because
for sure.
and I had that surgery in 2020. Recovery was fantastic. I just couldn't do the things that I wanted to do, but it wasn't like the shoulder where like I was physically in pain every day. I just couldn't do much of anything. Literally day after the surgery, I'm walking, going back to the hard-headedness.
Wow.
And then I just stayed one night, and the next day, such a nice nurse, and she brings the wheelchair, and she's like, "Okay, because you only stay one night." And I'm like, "Yeah, cool story, but I ain't going out in that wheelchair." And she's like, "No, it's policy." And I go, "That's fine, man, but I'm not." And my wife looks at her and says, "You don't know my husband. Like, you're not. There's not anything in the world you're gonna do to make him go in that chair." And she's like, "Well, at least can I walk with you?" And I go, "Absolutely." So I have a picture with this nurse. She was awesome. But every day I would just walk. And then when they gave me the okay to to go to the gym and ride a bike softly, I'd ride a bike. And then when they gave me the okay to the day, um, unfortunately, the day that they gave me the okay to start like working out, all the gyms closed because of COVID.
Of course.
So that's when I started building up, the garage a little bit and whatnot. But I'll never forget the first time I tried to like do any kind of physical activity other than walking. I couldn't do two push-ups.
Wow, really?
I couldn't do two push-ups. I lost all my strength, and I had to baby step it. And I remember like my mind was so going back to this the '06 surgery with the labrum. I went through a bit of, I hate this word because it's overused, but I don't deal well with when I can't do what I want to do, right? So I went in '06, kind of like through a depression because I was out of commission. I was younger. So naturally, my wife had concerns that now in 2020, 14 years later, but I may go through the same thing. And I told her, no, now the kids they're older, they're paying attention, and I gotta, make sure that they see a good example. So I dealt with it pretty well. Um, okay, I could break 2 push-ups today. Tomorrow I'll do 3. And I got baby steps. I mean, I got pictures. I'm like incline benching 5-pound dumbbells.
That's
Like a
crazy,
champ.
man.
Yeah, but I had to build it up, and then thank God, man, everything went great. But I was away from the mats for a year and a half. Thought jiu-jitsu was over. That was the one thing they always told me, before surgery, you can go back to all the things that you do. Post surgery, I did keep kind of pushing the doctor, and asked him more than I should have. And I'll never forget the offices were already closed because we had COVID. So it's like a FaceTime kind of, like this, like an appointment. And my wife's next to me, and I asked for the fourth or fifth time, hey, I know you told me I can go back to jiu-jitsu, but are you sure? And he said, listen, I told you can do everything that you did before, and you can. However, and I'm like, fuck, I shouldn't have asked, And
Yep.
he says, if you were my friend, I would tell you to find another hobby. And I was like, connections get messed up, man. I gotta leave. No, I have no shame, Kenny. I almost got emotional, man, because I was like, damn, like that sucked. So a year and a half I went without it. And then I went, going back to my wife never tells me not to do anything. That's the one thing she asked. Please, because of your spine, I don't go back into this. But a year and a half later, I just needed it. I needed it. You see the same videos I see of cops getting manhandled and killed and whatnot. So I found a great school that I sat down with the head professor. I talked about my concerns. He assured me it was a safe school and whatnot. I felt confident about that. And then I told my wife, and she was supportive. And that was about 5 years ago. So I've been back about 5 years now.
That's awesome,
You
man.
know,
That's a cool
and go
story.
figure that. Go figure that. January of 24, and I'm super weird like that, and I remember stuff like that. But I was on a regular, weekly date night with my wife, and January of 24, I think it was the end of the month, and she said how jujitsu saved our marriage, and I was like, "What?" My wife's never trained, by the way, like jujitsu, and I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "You've always been a great dude and a great father, but something about this jujitsu thing that you're doing, it's make you so much like more chill, and you handle like." She's like, she describes it as, I'm very thorough, right? Like I'm very like the working out. Like I'm very, I think, you have to be as well, right? Like, you have your plans. I gotta hit the gym this day and this time. I don't care how I feel. It needs to get done. I got this podcast this day. I set this meeting up. It comes down to it. I don't feel like it. F how you feel. It's gonna get done, right?
Yep.
And so she said the same way that's made you successful because you're so like, regimented. Well, if one little thing goes out of your way, it throws you out of whack. Where now with jujitsu, you kind of just go with the flow a little bit more. You're still, but if something goes out of whack, you kind of handle it, a little bit better. So it's great that she saw the benefit for someone who doesn't do it herself,
Yeah,
But
that's awesome. Did you I don't know if I could like, I have a partially torn rotator cuff, and I'm dreading surgery, and it's been years, so I just kinda manage it because I don't know if I could not go to the gym for 3 months. Like, like, I don't I'm pretty even kill, like, but, like, the gym, I think, saves some of those, like, you know what I mean? Where, like,
yes,
I go beat myself up just so, like, my life is smoother, the worst part of my day is the morning when I'm kicking my own ass in the gym, so, I don't know.
yes.
How did you not I don't know, how did you stay sane for 3 months of not going to the gym?
Again, I would, this time around, I said to myself, okay, I can't do A, B, and C. Okay, what can I do? I can walk. I would literally get dropped off. My wife would drop me off at the gym. I'd have my headphones and my phone, and I'd watch like a documentary on the treadmill. I'd be walking three hours. That helped a
Oh, wow.
lot. because I through the years in the gym, I know a lot of people, and my wife calls me the mayor of Miramar, but I talk to everybody. But even just walking on the treadmill for hours, but in those 3 hours, let's just say, and I've had 7 people, yo, D, what's up? How you feeling, man? Like, it would just make my mood better.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit home feeling sorry for myself, So just even though if I couldn't do certain things, just being there, going back to the labrum surgery, I used to call it robo sling. I mean, it was the heavy duty sling,
Like for
and
your
my
body.
wife would drop me off, and I would just do the bike with one arm, and whatever, just to be around it. It helped my mindset.
And your positivity, have you always been this positive? Like looking at adversity and always seeing I guess the bright line in it?
No, I don't think always. I think it's been something that's learned and through experience for sure, because I went through it's almost like I have a great memory, almost as good as my dad's, but there's certain things I think that we subconsciously, like, we want to forget, and we kind of forget. And going back to, like, the trauma of my loss, right? Because it was the part I didn't mention was, I lose her at 19. I get super close to her father. We weren't even that close when I was dating her,
Yeah.
but the family kind of fell apart. I get super close to the father. Um, Nothing more than I would just go hang out. He'd cook us steaks. We'd watch basketball games and football games, and he didn't, his wife kind of left him, and kids were doing their own thing. And it's a moment where, like, how cool was my dad at the time? Because he never made me feel like he was jealous about any of that, because I'm hanging out with this other dude who's not my father. But I think he understood what it was. And in many ways, me and this dude were there for one another. And then he killed himself,
Oh man.
So then it was like, damn, dude, like, what the hell, So then I'm not even 2 years from this loss. Now I got this other loss, and it was just, for a 20-year-old kid who's never dealt with anything like that, it was tough. Um, then the years of, again, trying to find myself. That's why, again, when I talk to people now, and they're going through hardships, they're going to.
I think it's pretty evident that I'll probably be speaking at the Justice X conference, but I wanted to give my little instructor spiel like everyone else's. And the main reason is because I wanted to come in here and thank all these amazing instructors that are willing to donate their time away from their family, their profession, and their friends to come and make the profession better. I don't know how I became so lucky with the ability to surround myself with amazing people in this profession. I have some of the most amazing friends in this profession. They're the most selfless individuals willing to go out on a whim, put a conference together with me, and just to try to make the profession a little bit better. And I don't know how I pulled this off. I don't know what it is, but I'm beyond grateful for them. That being said, when I speak at the conference, communication is the biggest thing to me. I think that communication is the most important tool that we have as cops, and that's not verbal communication. That could be nonverbal communication. I'm going to focus a lot of my instruction on that aspect, where communication is universal. It doesn't have to just pertain to interdiction. It's all of law enforcement. If you have the ability to communicate with someone that is a multimillionaire and a guy that's homeless living on the street, your career is going to be a lot more fruitful. And you have this ability to have a lot more empathy when you're communicating and understanding and being actively listening. Someone else came up with this. I love it. So I'm going to throw it out there. As cops, we are often waiting to respond and we're not actively listening, but you can't do them both. So I think as cops, you ask a question, engage, and actively watch what their response is. It doesn't have to be this such a strict format of what you're asking, chronological order or anything like that. Let a conversation flow like you're talking to one of your friends. Don't just be so rigid. And that's where I think a lot of us fail. And it's not our fault. Until you know that you're doing it wrong, you'll never know. Like I was very robotic as a cop, and I couldn't communicate with people. I know that for a fact. I'm introverted, and I go to the police academy and all this other stuff. But anyways, I can't wait to see you in South Carolina in April of 2026 with all these amazing instructors.
How I'm not religious, but I've always been a man of faith, and so I always had that belief that, and like my mom would always tell me, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. even when that light was like a little dot, I always believed that everything would work out. And if I didn't have that faith, I wouldn't I wouldn't be here, now. Um, Again, like you, right? I'm sleeved up. It's just cold now. It's cold in South Florida for us. It got down to like 30s. Um, but if not, like I would show you, like I have a lot of, like I have like Daniel in the lines then, which was given my name, and then the faith aspect of it, that was huge for me. It literally like saved my life. My first Bible verse that I got was Mark 11:24. That verse literally helped save my life, which that verse says that, when you ask for something in prayer and you believe and have faith that you will receive it, it will be yours, right? And so I always prayed, and believing that I would, get through this hard time, but it was not easy. And like I was saying before, a lot of things that you kind of subconsciously forget or want to forget. But even after dealing with the loss, like I went through a long time where everything I tried failed. Every plan I had didn't work out. Going to the baseball part of it, to just life, now as an adult, you realize that saying is true, right? You want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, and so it definitely, as I've gotten older, more positive. I was positive even back then that, again, I had the faith that it would work out, but yeah, also there was times where I was very upset with God and I was very frustrated because I truly sometimes felt, and it seems funny and silly now, but I truly felt there was times where if I woke up and said the sky's blue, that shit was gonna turn purple on my ass. You know what I'm saying? Because nothing I tried worked, and it was a very dark time. But when you get through that, that's why, yes. And I'm very passionate. I think you can tell that. I feel things. I feel strong about things. I see what's going on in our society, and it really bothers me to, like, I have to actively not look at certain outlets and whatnot because I get very, very frustrated with it. And my family, God bless them, where they don't bring up certain things on purpose. I'm the one that brings it up, and they'll be very patient with me. And I'll tell them, I go, it's not about politics for me. It's about, like, this can literally save my life or get me killed, you know? And I'm sure, like you, I've been in those incidents, life and death incidents, that just being part of the job, comes with the territory. And if it would have gone another way, and you have one idiot, just spreading this lie, and then others believe it to be true, and then they kind of like are dogging my name, you wouldn't like that either. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's a lot, but with experience, with just life, I try to be, we haven't got into like my whole role as a hostage negotiator, but like the communication skills that I use in that role, I use every day. And there's so much negativity in the world today, and so little things like making someone smile. I told you earlier, my wife calls me the mayor of Miramar. I talk to everybody, and I'll be like, so what? Like, and I'm that dude that I'll go to a supermarket, and I may see a cashier who looks like they're having a hard day, and now it's like a personal challenge. I'm gonna make them smile. What does it cost me? Nothing, but it may help them because you don't know what they're going through. The whole saying, which is true, everyone's fighting like these demons we don't know anything about, and again, another saying that's like cliche and whatnot, but I really, really believe, leave people better than you found them. You know,
I
leave
like
them
that.
better than that, but leave them better than you found them in any way, shape, or form. So I take pride in just trying to be a nice guy, man. Yes, I'm a pain in the butt for some things, and you know, um, definitely not a pushover in much of anything. But on a day in, day out, like, unless someone just gives me the reason not to, you know, just be a good dude, be nice, man. Try to pay it forward. That's why I always say my mission now in life is to be of service to as many people as possible in as many ways as possible. That's why I wrote the book. That's why I love teaching still. I love teaching staff, future, fellow cops, anybody, any way I can be of service. I don't do it for the money. Thank God I'm like, I make a very good living, but you want to leave your mark for the next, for the next generation. And
You said something, and people always ask like why I care so much or why I remain positive when it comes to this profession. It's like I've always said I want to leave the profession better than I found it. Like so, like
Mhm.
you said, an individual. I look at it like the law enforcement profession. If I can leave it better than I found it, I feel like I've accomplished something, and it's probably something that there's no quantitative way of determining that, but in my mind, I'm gonna remain positive about this profession because I love it. I love the people in it. Like, it takes a very, selfless person to do what the major 99% of cops do on a regular basis, you know? So, I don't know. I try not to feed into the negativity, but it does become challenging, when you see that cops are the lowest common denominator and it's polarizing at both ends. Like, I'd rather you just not even tell me good job and don't tell me like that you don't like the way I did something on the other. Just let us fucking be and let us do the job that most legislators have established the law that we can and can't do. Like, it's not us.
Yeah.
We get case law yearly updates where we can't do this anymore or we can do this now. Like things like that. It changes yearly. So if you don't like the things that we're doing and we're doing it by the letter of the law, then change the fucking law.
Yeah.
I
I say,
got
like, but
passionate about it.
I say like this also, like society nowadays, people don't want to have respectful conversations with people with opposing views. Think about that.
No, that's true.
Meanwhile, I will literally take a bullet for somebody with the complete opposite views the next time I'm in uniform. That's what I signed up for.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And one of my, I was, I mention this often because it just a perfect example of this. I told you I'm not religious, but I'm a God-fearing man, full of faith. And I have friends of other religions. I have friends that are atheists. And one victim of mine when I was in street crimes that always stood out to me was a full-fledged devil worshiping Satanist. Okay, and he had gotten robbed and battered like really bad. And the long story short of it is that at the end of the case, and I found, my suspect and got justice for this young man that was brutally beaten and robbed. He told me, Detective Herrera, like, thank you for treating me like a person. I know what I look like, I know what I believe in, and you treated me like anybody else. And I said, man, like, we don't believe the same thing, but you've treated me with respect, like I've treated you with respect, and we can go, get a cup of coffee tomorrow, and you don't believe the same thing as me, man. That's okay. And again, I mean, and that's the most extreme opposite that I've ever come in contact with. I remember being in his house. One of the times I went to go see him for a statement or whatever, and I mean, like the satanic flag and the whole kind of freaked me out, but.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's just a person. And unless you give me a reason not to, I'm gonna treat you with respect. You
Right.
know, I care much more when I talk about people in my circle. I care much more about how you treat people. Do you eliminate excuses or do you make excuses? Okay.
I like that.
Are you a hard worker or a hard complainer? You know,
Mm-hmm.
are you a leader who you know does what needs to be done despite the circumstances that you came from, or are you a victim of what came from? That's that saying, whatever it is, that, like, you know winners make things happen despite the obstacles, and losers kind of just settle for the obstacles. But I care more about those things than who you pray to, who you sleep with, and all that other stuff.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm the
Who you
same way.
voted for, all that stuff. It just
Yeah. Are you a good person? I don't get are you a good person or not? Like, that's kind of, this is what it comes down to. All that other stuff that you remove from that, it is what it is. That's, that's your own beliefs. But if you're a good person, I got nothing but respect for you.
yeah.
You did mention something a little bit ago that I wanted to touch on in, um, trying to word it the right way so I don't come out sound like a jerk, but I've noticed a new era of policing, and not consistently, but there's a lot of I can't even say new era. I'll just word it the way like, I can't stand when people go to intermediate weapons nonstop and they don't understand how much going hands-on will benefit them because a taser's 26% of the time it's accurate or effective. So now you just pissed them off and now like so I don't know. I don't know where we went with policing where like going hands-on has been like taboo and you're being I don't know if you're being taught or you're just afraid to do it. Like it's just I don't know. Going hands-on resolves so many more issues, and I'm not talking about, like, going punching people in the face. I'm just talking about being able to control people with your own hands before you start using batons, pepper spray, or tasers. Like, it just I
Right.
don't it's crazy to me that I don't know if we're being taught that and it's going away that route or what it is, but I don't know. It's frustrating to watch it happen.
I think there's two extremes also because again, obviously as a negotiator, right? Like de-escalation is my jam, right? But I always say that it gets to a point where there's no negotiator Danny. And it's very simple. Don't get in my bubble and definitely don't touch me because then we're not talking.
Yep,
But prior to that, yes, there is value because I think again sometimes it can be like too much de-escalation
I agree.
where like you get the 15 times drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife. No, like we're not doing all that either.
Right,
Okay. There are situations, and we all know those cops that get into a scene and make things worse. So
100%.
there is skills that can be learned and worked on daily where I take a lot of pride in when I get to a scene because I still very much work the road when there's no school and the summers and whatnot. And when there was overtime, and I take pride in being the dude that when I get to your call, oh good man, Herrera's here, he's gonna calm this shit down, not he's gonna oh shit, Herrera's here,
Mhm.
he's gonna escalate it. And I always tell the younger guys like our biggest tools are our ears and our mouth, man. Like start with that. Again, when lines are crossed, we can't come back from that. And when you have to go hands on, go hands on. But I also don't think it's a coincidence. Have I, gotten physical altercations? Of course. Have I used jiu-jitsu at work? Of course. Do I get in fights all the time? No. Because I treat people with respect. I know how to listen. I know how to speak like an adult respectfully. Um, and I would treat you with the respect unless you dictate otherwise, you know. Um, but to that point, yeah, the other extreme is, oh God, what do? I don't have any training. I have no confidence. So let me grab all the things and then we do all that. And that's
Yep,
what really there's pros and cons to like all the technology we have nowadays. I think it's again, we cannot pretend it's not an issue. Going back to like why I wrote the book, we cannot pretend school shootings are not happening. We cannot pretend that cops are not getting killed damn near daily. So I encourage every officer, whether you know or not, watch these videos. I know they suck. I know you don't want to see them. I know they're hurtful. But if they don't tell you your ass needs to train, I don't know what will.
right.
Because yeah, and it sucks, man. Because I don't want to see officers getting hurt and getting killed. But you have to kind of study those things and analyze why is this happening. Because and that's why I love again, man, I I have this my tight ass hoodie, but like I got the flag, man. Like I'm proud of what we do, man. But I'm the biggest cop critic. And if you are out of shape, you're lazy, or you're just an asshole, I'm the biggest critic you're gonna find because you're in the job for the wrong reasons, or you're not going about it the right way.
Yep.
But you have to. I hate the like, and we all know those cops, and we all know those people. Like the tough guy just talks a lot of smack, and when it comes down to it, you're the first one hiding, not knowing what to do. You know,
Or the
and
yeah, or the one
you
that
have to train, and it is hard, man. It's hard. It's a 10:05 local time here. I'll be up at 4 in the morning to go get choked out by my friends. And we have a great time, and it's fun, and I love it. But like, jujitsu's hard, dude. Like, and you have to learn how to deal with like feeling like you suck. But if and when I have to make contact with someone on the street, the chances are they're not nowhere near as trained as the guys that I train with daily, right? So I'm gonna be in pretty good shape. But if I never did those things, again, going back to I grew up playing baseball. If I never, in practice, hit off speed pitches, I can't go to a game and hit off speed pitches,
right.
If I never work on my backhand, I can't just wing it in practice. You want to make, my dad would always say, make practice harder than the game, so the game is easy. Same thing with I'm literally training jiu-jitsu 4 days a week, So that's, I mean, this whatever it is, 6, 7 hours a week. that I'm like involved in physical altercations for like extended for in the real world. I'm not gonna be rolling for fighting for 7-8 rounds. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
But so it's almost like it's easy. And it, literally the times that I have gotten physical at work, it's a quick Kimura, man, and we're good. And that's that. But if I didn't train for that and it become like just reaction,
Yep.
same thing with firearms, right? How many dry rounds and whatnot
Yep.
did we go through, right?
Yep.
And repetition and just like practicing getting out the holster, where you can do it right without looking and doing all these things. Well, you have to practice those things. You can't wing it,
Yep.
So I just cops need to train. It's not like any other job. I get it. Time. You miss me with the time excuse because my first answer to that always, how many kids did you raise? And if you didn't, I raised 3. They were all small. It's hard. I get it. Do it. I get you don't want to go to the gym. We brought it up earlier. If you only did the things we felt like doing, you would never do any of these things.
Yeah. None of it. None of it at all.
But you have to get it done. Otherwise, go sit in a cubicle, crunch numbers, and that's no disrespect. Do that. But if you're gonna have a badge and gun, and your job is to protect and serve your community, but also protect and serve your colleagues and yourself, and your duty is to go home to your family, I don't know how people are doing it. Not training, not in shape, overweight, can't run. I have no idea. It's
Yeah,
just,
that's exactly like not only are you a liability to yourself, but you're a liability to supposedly like the people you work with that you're probably close with, friends, family, and then it's a very selfish thing that you choose not to train or choose not to work out, and then you get involved in a life or death situation, and then you put it on the guys and girls that you work with that now they have to go tell your family that you're not coming home tonight because you chose that working out or being in shape or being under like any of that was your own choice and you chose not to do it. Now, I don't know. It's a very selfish way to think if you think that you could be 400 pounds and do this fucking job.
yeah. And the time thing, I always say when I talk about police work, I can speak for my agency, my experiences and what I've heard. I cannot speak for every agency because I don't know, but I'm guessing that many agencies offer time to work out, be it a lunch break or whatnot. I know my agency does. And I'll tell the rookies, if you have no other time in your personal time, you have that time, take it. And I got a spoiler alert for you. I tell them, some veterans, they're gonna frown on you for taking that time. How dare you take a lunch break? And you know what you're gonna find? They're always the veterans that are not in shape. If
Mhm.
you have no other time, I'll do that in a crunch if I need to. I like not being rushed, not like having to pay attention to the radio. So I'll find time my own time. But when I've had to on duty, do it because you have no excuse. But so I'm not gonna work out because it's gonna offend somebody for me taking my meal time or whatever. No
Your
man,
life depends
get
on
it
it.
done.
Yeah, your life depends. If someone's gonna frown upon you because you're doing something that maybe prevents you from dying one day, I don't know. It'd be hard for me to respect that person.
Of course. I know, by the way, aside from all the benefits as a police officer, it may make you live longer and healthier and have a
Yeah,
better quality of life. I mean, I don't know.
yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. I could talk to you all day. I've never met you in my life, and I probably could keep talking to you. We're running
Same,
on like
brother, same.
an hour and 20 minutes, and I feel bad keeping you up. And you're only going to get like 5 hours of sleep at this point.
I'm used to that, but that's all good.
But so I'm going to wrap it up here. We end with one question, but if there's anything else you want to touch on before I ask that one question, the floor is yours, man.
No, man, I just appreciate and listen, we have each other's number now, and I've been fortunate to be on some podcasts, and I love it because genuinely speaking, people have wanted to talk to me about the book, and obviously while that's important and that's very a big mission to me to help keep kids safe. I enjoy that just organically. I get to talk about hostage negotiations and jujitsu and family life, all these other things that I'm very passionate about. I don't want to be, just about like one thing because that's not me. I'm very passionate about several things. So again, I appreciate you having me on. We have each other's number. I've told every podcast host, I'm not the type of person who like now you've had me on and I'm gonna get lost. Like you got a friend for
No.
life, man. I appreciate you and again, this will be, I'm sure, the first of many conversations. So I
Yeah, for sure.
appreciate
And I try to stay in touch at minimum a few texts here and there just to check on people that about my podcast just because I start to know so much about you that I feel like I built a relationship. Like it's not something that I'm just like, oh yeah, cool. I built a relationship with you for an hour and a half and now I don't know you. I'm like, no, like
Yeah.
I'll. Anyways, we teach for a company called Justice Academy. So what is your definition of justice?
My definition of justice, I would say giving ultimately giving others what they deserve. Maybe is an easy way for me to frame it.
All right, it's perfect, man.
Giving others what they deserve.
Absolutely. I actually have one other question that I wanted to talk to you about earlier. If any of your kids wanted to be in law enforcement, would you encourage that or would you discourage that?
I encourage my my kids to follow their paths, and it's crazy because it's a an interesting, challenging phase that my wife and I are at now. You know, our oldest is 24 now. He's, you know, he lives in another state, has so for a few years now, and he's doing well. We still have our 20-year-old daughter, and our 17-year-old son is going to turn 18 in a few weeks. And we may have had certain plans for them, but seeing them very self-sufficient, we were very it's a very honest household. We raised them, you know, to some people kind of rough, but just honest. And when we didn't, and a quick, you know, not to go too much longer, but a quick story on that is just, you know, always just being honest and always giving them the opportunity to respectfully express themselves. Okay. And, but like, that's another thing that drives me crazy about like this generation now of like, you know, parents and making excuses for their kids. We never did that, like ever. Like if we were in a parent conference and they said, "Hey, you know, Jacob, our little one, you know, he did this, that, and the other," instead of like, "What do you mean? He could never, he would never," I would say, "All right, he probably won't be in school tomorrow because I'm gonna beat his ass." All right, you know, and you know, just kidding, just kidding. You know, but like, or even like, oh, you know, mom, pop, like, we don't like this teacher. Can we change? I'm like, what? I don't get to pick my sergeant, my guy. Like, what are you
Yeah.
talking about? You know?
Yeah.
And the little one, Jacob, he played baseball many years, and I always give the same example. My wife, who's the mom, nurturing, and you know, because we expect the dads to be kind of a little rougher, right?
Hmm.
But let's say, you know, little Jacob didn't make like a travel team that he, you know, put in for, which happened a few times. And my wife would would call him and, "Hey, come here, little guy. You know why you didn't make that team? Because you're mediocre. You're not good enough. The good news is you have two options. You can keep working hard or work harder and get better and then be an asset to the team, or you can just be a guy and stay mediocre." And I've said this story many times, and people are like, "Your wife would call your son mediocre?" I'm like, yes. I'm not calling him a effing asshole. You know what I'm saying? But how rewarding them when he would work, bust his behind, and then make those teams.
Yeah. That's
But if we would have told our kids, "No, you know, no, little man, like you didn't make it because the coach doesn't like us. He doesn't like Hispanics. That's what it is. Like, get the hell out of here, man." You know? So to say all that, if any one of my three kids would have wanted to go in law enforcement, I would have supported it. Again, I'm very proud of the job. I think the job well done and the right, you know, if you're the right kind of officer, there's no better job in the world, man. Like really, happens to be none of the three have ever, you know. I don't know if it's because they grew up with it, you know, but never. I've always encouraged them, you know, never pushed them towards law enforcement. I've always pushed them to not only follow their dreams, be of service to others in whatever way that is to you, and also never, ever, ever chase money. Chase passion. If you love what you do, you're going to be great at it. And if you're great at it, you'll be compensated well for it. But if you paid me $1 million right now, and if I had a Bible, I put my hand to the Bible. You pay me $1 million right now to do a job I hate every day, I'm going to tell you to get the million and stick it you know where.
Yeah.
because I will not do that, you know. So no, none of them ever wanted to be in police work, but if they did, I would support it. I would support whatever they wanted to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
Awesome, man. So it's been nothing but a pleasure. And then, yeah, we'll be in touch. Thank you again for
Absolutely.
joining me, man.
No, thank you for having me, brother. I appreciate you, man. And I'll give a shout out to Heather again. I'll reach out and thank her again, man. You're awesome, bro. Appreciate you.
Be safe, bro.
All right, brother. You too.